So human happiness is what the talks are about. And the happiness is defined as happiness through peace of mind. Continuous, unbroken peace of mind, regardless of the circumstance we find ourselves in. This regardless of the circumstance is really trying to point us to the fact that our happiness isn't dependent on circumstance. Our happiness isn't to be found in the flow of life. So, I'm sorry to say, but if you find yourself involved in what is happening, outside of what is happening in the very present moment for you right here and now, if you find yourself involved in the community's development, the world's development, you're more than likely attached to outcomes, believing that happiness will one day be available when life has improved. And unless that gets cut off, your unhappiness is going to be perpetuated. And I'm saying this because I keep becoming more and more aware, because of what I'm seeing, how involved, how attached people are to things along the spectrum of pleasure and pain, circumstance. So how passionate, not in a good way. I mean, the passion might look like it's good, but passion in this regard is not healthy. So I keep seeing how people are really involved, meaning it feels like this is really important, that what is happening is really important. It's not. I mean, it might be from the perspective of a certain benchmark, but finding it important is an obstacle to human happiness in this moment. So it's I'm not trying to tell you what you should think. I'm just putting forward descriptions. And so if what is most important to you is to be happy in life, to find yourself at peace with life, then that movement has to stop. And I'm not asking you to stop it. You can't stop it, because if it's going, it means it's because certain structures, certain dynamics are in place. The dynamics that would be in place are psychological identity, which at its core is based on the deeply ingrained belief of doership and attachment to outcome, which has experienced pain in the past, more than likely pain in the past, that was received as an attack on who I am, created an extreme uncomfortableness in the moment because of what someone did or didn't do, and how we felt that defined who we are. And that becomes and became part of the psychological identity we know ourselves as. And that psychological identity is going to be uncomfortable in life. It is going to get involved in circumstance. So I'm not telling someone to stop getting involved in circumstance. How can we, if there's a identity in place that is forced to get involved by its very nature, to tell that identity to stop being involved in the future, stop being involved in the future outlook, stop being involved in what's happening, is like telling fire to stop being hot. However, the involvement in the flow of life, involvement in what the other is doing or not doing, what might happen in the future, how life might look. That involvement can change if our genes and up-to-date conditioning get readjusted, because the psychological identity is part of our genes and up-to-date conditioning. There is no doer. There is no one that I can tell to do it differently. There's a body-mind organism, an instrument here, that doesn't include somebody as a separate doer. There is the body-mind organism with name and form. So this body-mind organism has the name Roger, and it functions according to its design. It has a personality. It has characteristics. It has a gender. It has an age. It has preferences. It's a complex machine functioning. And so the speaking is part of its functioning. There isn't a Roger additional to the machine. There isn't a Roger that controls the machine. There's just Roger, the machine. And don't get carried away with the word machine, thinking that it reduces the human being down to something basic. The machine is referring to a very complex instrument. An instrument with emotional capacity, intellectual capacity, with senses, and with consciousness functioning through it. The consciousness essentially is aware of the life experience, is aware of the machinery in its complexity, meaning aware of the emotions and the thoughts and the actions, and is aware of the world in which the instrument operates. It registers the experience. And that consciousness is a layer of the instrument. It is an aspect of the instrument. So we could say that the instrument has an aspect to it which allows it to be aware of itself and of life. But that awareness is aware of whatever is, whatever the instrument is, and whatever the circumstance is, and how the two interact. That's what the awareness has to be aware of. The awareness doesn't have choice. Awareness is simply aware of what arises within it, you could say. And what arises within it is the body-mind organism with all of its complexity, the environment in which the body-mind organism operates and functions. And as a whole, awareness is aware of that. And awareness is aware of that from the perspective of the body-mind organism. Now, that perspective from the body-mind organism can take several different forms, some of which feel very impersonal. Some of the perspectives from the body-mind organism actually feel as if they are from outside the body-mind organism. But don't take experience, especially experience on the surface, to be a reflection of truth. As we investigate the experience, even the ones, or especially the ones that feel as though they have nothing to do with the body, we may find certain hints and clues within the experience that get us to rethink that conclusion. But let's not go into that part of the talk so quickly. So awareness is aware of the human being's experience, both the internal, what we could call the internal functioning of the human being, and how the external is received by the human being. That's what awareness gets to see, gets to be aware of. So awareness is aware of all of the sensory input and the sense of the emotions and the feelings and the thoughts. And awareness is also aware of itself. Or rather, it can become aware of the awareness aspect. Often it is aware and not aware of the awareness aspect, which means it is aware of everything else, but not aware of its own function, its own existence. It's not aware of the faculty of awareness, even though the awareness by default has to be there, given that there is awareness of everything. And awareness can also become aware of the sense of existence, the sense I am, I exist, that runs through the center of the human experience. And that too can remain hidden, such that it's there. Otherwise, if it wasn't there, we would feel very, very different. If the sense of existence wasn't there, if there was a switch that could turn it off and leave awareness, let's say awareness could remain. Let's say you could turn off a switch that removes the sense of existence, then you would really feel like something was odd. Because a key component of the experience that has always been there, the sense of I am, will have vanished, and then you really feel like no one exists, not in a good way. And yet, because oh goodness, because this sense of existence has been there all the time, it's so fundamental to the experience, and yet it's completely overlooked. Just like the awareness can be. The awareness is so fundamental. Yesterday I spoke about awareness as being a bit like light, that when the light shines on the object appears. And if there is total darkness, the object, you could say is there, but in practice it doesn't exist because there is no light. Now, that can be a bit confusing because it might make the point. So the awareness lights up the experience, but not in a way where it just casts light for then. So the light is an analogy. So the light is an analogy for awareness. The awareness doesn't actually cast light onto objects, because if we saw it as the awareness just casting light onto the objects, then it means, oh well, there is an object there to be seen, and we still might not get the sense that it's being seen because of the awareness, or being registered, being awared by the faculty of awareness. So if we were to be able to switch off a switch that removes the awareness from the present moment, even for someone who has never come across spirituality and is completely obsessed with material gain. So in that regard, we would say that that person has, if we were using the word differently, as in a different context, we could say that the person is, unconscious, as in, isn't thinking about spiritual pursuits. Now, unconscious in that regard is different to actually conscious. So when we're using the word awareness or consciousness, to talk about the faculty of registering the momentary experience, what's here right now in each moment. There is an awareness that registers that. And so even if someone is completely caught up in egotistical movements, in the belief in doership, attachment, suffering, awareness is fully present. It is registering, the cars on the street, the birds flying across the thing, and the thinking mind. So if this person is completely lost in suffering, then it is awareness that is aware of the suffering feeling. It is the awareness that is aware of the thinking about blame towards someone for what has happened, or blame towards oneself, or whatever. So without awareness, if you switched off the awareness, the whole experience, the whole momentary experience would collapse into nothing. There would be nothing there to be aware of it. So in the English language, the word consciousness, which can be interchanged with the word awareness, is used in a way that can give us a hint about what this consciousness is. It's not intended, it's just, it's appropriate that it's used. So some words are used in English language very differently to how they are used in spirituality. But the word consciousness, as in he lost consciousness or he regained consciousness, is used typically in the English language in a way that will really demonstrate to us what this consciousness is, what faculty of the human being is referred to by the word consciousness. Or awareness. So the boy was playing baseball and someone swung the bat and hit him on the head with the bat. And he lost consciousness. And so we have consciousness, he's hit on the head, and he loses consciousness. So consciousness is here, and consciousness is lost. And then he regains consciousness. So when consciousness is here, there is awareness of the present moment. When consciousness is lost, meaning consciousness is turned off, the present moment experience collapses into nothing. Or rather, there was content, there was experience, consciousness is withdrawn and the whole experience withdraws with it, and then consciousness comes back and the experience of life comes back with it. So we might get the sense, consciousness is that which is aware. So everyone is always fully conscious. What everyone isn't necessarily, although they are fully conscious, is aware of the consciousness that is always there. If you ask someone about consciousness, they may have very little to say about it. They say, I don't know what consciousness. Never thought about consciousness. What do you want me to say about consciousness? Which really means there isn't an appreciation of the consciousness functioning through them, or an appreciation that I am conscious, that everyone is conscious. Otherwise they'd have something to say about the word consciousness. So becoming aware of your consciousness, which is when it happens in a way where there is an experiential recognition of it, an experiential appreciation of this faculty that illuminates the present moment, that enables the present moment to be. When there is an experiential recognition, an experiential sense of the consciousness in a way that wasn't there before, that can be called an awakening moment. And it is consciousness becoming aware of, or consciousness becoming conscious of itself, or awareness becoming aware of itself. Now, I guess it's good to explain why in some teachings the word consciousness and awareness are treated differently. They're not necessarily interchanged in some teachings. So Nisargadatta Maharaj often used the word consciousness as that linked to the person, or consciousness as being individual and personal. Not necessarily the source of suffering, but he would keep it as a personal aspect. And then he would refer to something beyond consciousness, which he would refer to as awareness. So awareness in Nisargadatta's teaching is the sort of the big daddy within the manifestation. The source in the manifestation would be, as far back as you can go in the manifestation, is awareness for Nisargadatta. And consciousness is essentially a level down expression or object that awareness is aware of. So consciousness essentially in some teachings might be referred to as being a product or associated with personal, with an individuation. And if there is an awakening to awareness, then as used in those teachings, so we have to understand that a teaching will use a word in a certain context. And so within the context of the teaching, the word is referring to something specific, usually an aspect of the manifestation, an aspect of the experience, the momentary experience. And so in Nisargadatta's teaching, awareness is that which we become aware of, and once, actually I shouldn't say we become aware of, because in that knowing awareness, we know ourself as awareness, which really means the individual, knowing oneself as an individual, has fallen away and has been replaced by the sense of self that knows itself as not a thing, as formless awareness. formless awareness is not located anywhere in particular. When there is awakening to the formless awareness, there tends to be a delocalization sense, as in what I am, and even with the use I am is being used very liberally here, because the awareness or rather in the experience, there will be the sense that what the subject is, what is real, that which is aware, that which is not a thing. So really the word subject is good here. The subject knows itself to be formless awareness. And from that perspective, all other content is known as object. And subject knows itself not to be objective, not to be something, but knows itself as formless, subjective nothingness. And that's an experiential state. So when that awakening happens, which isn't important for everyone, because there are specific paths that can bypass that awakening being necessary. That awakening is really just creating, as I see it, from a more integrated perspective, it was just creating a shift in the wiring of the brain of the human being. And that experience, or that state, which at the time felt like the end of experience and felt like it was reality presenting itself rather than it being what I'm describing as an experience, so that to me is a shift that is doing something to the wiring in the brain, but at the time it doesn't feel like it has anything to do with a personal experience. It doesn't feel like that was an experience of the person. However, what I'm suggesting is that was an experience of the person. It was an experience of the person that felt like the end of the person, that felt like it demonstrated the truth of the manifestation. And so what it demonstrates, or what it feels like, is that the manifestation is only an appearance, is only an experience within consciousness, within awareness in this case, I'll use the word correctly. That the whole universe, what we imagine or what we knew as a physical universe, in that experience is presented as only an appearance in consciousness that exists and collapses back into nothing, and then reappears, collapses back into nothing, reappears, collapses back into nothing, reappears. And because the collapse into nothing means there is nothing there to be aware of the nothing, that all that there is awareness of are the on phases. The off phases are unregistered. And so then the on phase appears like a continuous reality. And so in that experience, that at the time doesn't feel like an experience, what is demonstrated, but as I said, don't take experience as a reflection of truth, what seems to be demonstrated is the nature of reality, the nature of the universe, the nature of life, as simply an experience arising in awareness, known by awareness. Known by awareness means really awareness witnessing everything that is arising, knowing that everything that is arising is essentially made of and not separate from awareness. And so if you interchange the word consciousness, you can say everything is arising in consciousness, made of consciousness and witnessed by consciousness. However, as I was saying, some teachings won't use the word consciousness because that is reserved for something more personal, something more linked to the body and person, whereas this experience tends to include a very empty, no-personness. There is an understanding of non-duality. It's not really an understanding, actually, not because it's not intellectual. It's experiential in the quality, the qualitative nature of that awakening. Includes this non-dualness to it, where there is not something separate, aware of everything else. However, it's not really understanding in the sense that I wouldn't say that what that state or shift or experience, what would be referred to as a non-experience, because the typical experience of I am a person in a world with subjects as the person and the subject, and there are lots of objects outside of me. The structure of the typical experience changes radically. The construct of the experience changes such that there is no subject-object relationship. There is no person that is aware of objects. There is awareness that knows itself as the subject, aware of everything, and knows everything is not separate from it, experiences everything is not separate from what it is. But I wouldn't say that that is what I would, after the experience and after some refining, I wouldn't say that is a representation of reality at all. So that's why I wouldn't say that that is understanding. In fact, if someone were to hold that as it presents as reality or truth, I would say that is misunderstanding. So I guess at this point, because the topic was on the little post today, so the topic will be explaining why some seekers, and indeed some teachings, will talk about the end of the person, or talk about the fact that there is no person. And so I wanted to explain on what basis a seeker will have the strong conviction that there is no person. And it's important, I think, for us to understand why that is said, and to be able to appreciate what the person means by that. They might not even necessarily fully know what they mean by it, but they'll be going from the experience. So in a way, this talk isn't necessarily for those, well, it is for those that haven't had the experience. And remembering, I did suggest that having these shifts is not all that it's cracked up to be. Essentially, I see these shifts as being the result of wiring in the brain being rewired. And that rewiring is a loosening up of the way that the brain interprets life. A loosening up of the brain so that the brain actually is capable of re-rendering the life experience. Now, that loosening up is very important, not really in order to create a new rendered qualitative experience of life. It's not that important for the brain to be able to create a sense of the subject or I being formless awareness. That's really just a means to an end. So if the brain is fed with descriptions of reality, then those descriptions, if it's received by the body-mind organism, which includes the brain, can start to run interference on the way the brain is processing life. And then these peak experiences can happen. And as I said, it's not really about the peak experiences, it's more about the brain loosening up its way of relating to objects and relating to the sense of self, which then allows some of the core beliefs to basically exit the system. And the core beliefs are essentially energies. Most of what we are is energetic. The body is an energetic instrument. Human beings are energetic instruments. So even on the most gross level of form has a lot of energy in it. And then there is emotions and beliefs and energy in energetic form, which are all different forms of manifestation, and they are essentially all energy. And beliefs, especially the belief of the identity, is packed with energy. So a bit like this notion of energy. I mean, we've heard about how you can split an atom and create a vast amount of energy by doing that. You know, releasing energy out of an atom. And in the same way, when you open up a belief, there is a huge amount of energy in that belief system. And what comes out of the system are these beliefs in doership and attachment to outcomes. And so there is an energetic release, and what is released with those energetic releases is the sense of who I am. That is the who I am on the psychological level, which is basically deeply ingrained beliefs. So while those beliefs are in place and that identity is in place, it is that is forced to become obsessed and feel attacked by outcomes and feel like that's what's really important, and I have to put all my effort into changing this and making it better. it's that energy of the belief system that is forced to. So when the structure of the system it changes, then those belief systems become vulnerable, a bit like a building that has been in an earthquake, and the earthquake has sort of cracked and shaken the building, and then that means that certain substructures or other structures in the building can move around within the bigger structure. And in this case, its beliefs can start to get released. And for some people, that process can happen, the shifts can happen without the experiences taking place. So there are a lot of people that say, I haven't had this experience, and I'm waiting for it, I'm craving it. And I thought, well, there must be a reason why you are craving it, and the obvious reason is because it's believed to be very important. It's believed often to be the thing itself. And I would say it's important in a way that it is a result of a shift in the structure. And so that's why it's important. So if there's been something inside you that has changed without the experience, then who needs the experience? So why is it that someone will say there is no person when this experience happens? And the reason being is that in that awakening experience, what is shown is that life is an experience. Life is an arising inner consciousness. Now, I wouldn't say that it shows us that life is an arising in a universal consciousness of source, and there is nothing else outside of this. That's what it appears to show us when we have been guided by descriptions that tell us that beforehand. So the descriptions tell us that, and then that experience happens. It feels like it is the recognition that all of the content is arising within consciousness. And because the awareness or consciousness has been described as what we are, and that is God, and that God is everything, and because it feels like there is no separation, and that everything is arising and made of awareness, then the conclusion that the brain forms, the intellect forms, without us even realizing that this is what's happened, is that, oh, now I know that that is truth. Because that experience happened and that proved to me that that is the way it is. If we look at that experience, we could start to see that that experience could be justified or could be the same, could be So that same experience can be explained by various different realities. So as we understand what that experience was showing, we could say, well, it could be because of reality 1, it could be because of reality 2, or reality 3, meaning 3 different models that would all result in life being an experience in consciousness, but what is outside of the consciousness experience in each model would be radically different. And we don't get to understand what is outside of the model, even after that even during that awakening experience. It doesn't tell us where it comes from. What it shows us is a new look at the everyday, or the manifestation, meaning the present moment experience. It gives us a new glimpse or a new perspective of what the present moment experience is. You know, if we've only ever experienced something from one angle, and then you get to see it from a different angle, if we always thought that that was the only angle it was able to be experienced from, and therefore didn't take the way we experience it as being a relative experience, then when we're shown a different angle, it's like, oh my goodness, I can see it from this angle. And so now you've got, you're seeing the one thing from 2 different angles, which can allow you to know it better, to have a better understanding of what it is. So what tends to happen is that we discard the initial perspective as ignorance and as illusion, and the new awakened experience as reality. So we don't necessarily have 2 versions because we've discarded the first version and just said, oh, well, now I'm just interested in this new version. But if certain things are said and they're received by still the intellect, even though there is this witnessing state that can remain for years, at some point when certain things are registered, the thinking mind that, or even it could be the working mind that is making some errors, drawing some wrong conclusions, gets some new information and reconcludes, adjusts its conclusions. And there can be another aha moment about an error that the thinking was making about what that experience was demonstrating. So the experience demonstrates the awareness aspect, and often we have no space to classify awareness as being anything to do with the body. The body is sensed to be just an object arising in awareness, because there is a sense that the body is being awared from outside of the body, and therefore the body is a subset of awareness. So if we hold that conclusion based on how the experience is presented, then a certain mindset about what the experience is demonstrating will be in place. And if that mindset is challenged because new information comes in that we think that's a good point, when the good point is thought about, contemplated, it can then create a shift in the experience. And the experience changes. Now, we can always go back in a way to that experience if we're still somehow holding it as the truth. But at some point, that experience becomes irrelevant. If it really becomes irrelevant, if our intellect really grasps that that is not what it's all about, then the intellect says, oh, I'm not interested in holding on to that anymore. And the experience can fade away. Or at least the certain aspects of the experience that were very pronounced can become more integrated into what ends up being a different qualitative experience. So the experience of the present moment is then re-rendered into some hybrid of the starting experience, where there was a body knowing the objects as objects outside of itself and knowing itself as the subject. Then there was this awakened experience where there was an awakening of awareness and the sense that the body is just an object, and what the subject is just formless awareness, and the body is just an object arising in awareness. And then some new information comes in, and the experience can morph into a hybrid, let's say. And that's when our insisting that that was the absolute tends to be something that we look back on as, well, what to do? I, made that error. And that's just the process. It's nothing to be concerned about. It is very humbling in a way. It is very demonstrative of the same error, essentially, that the human being was making before the awakening experience, and that is to draw absolute conclusions about things based on what ends up being just an experience. So why is it that it's said that there's no person? Because in that awakening experience, the experience is seen to be a whole lot of layering of objects. And the subject is known to be formless awareness. And so the experience of a body is then, and the experience of a person is then seen to be the layering of a whole lot of different objects, like the body object, or all of the senses, the visual object, the sense of touch, the thoughts, the emotions, the sense of I am. So that's why in some teachings, even I am is not what we are, because I am is talking about consciousness in the personal sense. And the formless awareness, in a way you would say, doesn't even, when there is a sense of being formless nothingness, even the sense I is absent. And so when people talk about, oh, I've realized I am, some teachers or seekers will say, oh, well, you haven't really awakened to the absolute yet, which is the absence of I am. Even I am is just an appearance within the formless awareness the absolute. And that, I would say, is something that we will be humbled about, because there needs to be a movement away from this absolute, knowing oneself as absolute, formless awareness, not human, not a person, and an appreciation that that was just the revelation of a layer of the person, a layer of, or an aspect of the human being. The human being, as I was saying, has consciousness. And consciousness is the sense of I am and the faculty of awareness. So that awakening experience to me is a peak experience, a personal, an experience of the person, where the sense of the person is absent. But that doesn't mean that there's no person. Just because there is an experience where the sense of the person falls away doesn't mean there's no person. I mean, plenty of people have taken substances that can create various senses, as in various feelings of knowing oneself very differently, feelings where the sense of I fall away. But is it not feasible? And so what would be argued is, when you take the substance, reality is presenting itself. And I'm saying, well, we don't know that. You take the substance, and the person is now experiencing a different quality of experience, because maybe the substance is doing something to the neural network in the brain that is causing the experience of life and the experience of self to change. And then we take that as reality and say, oh, I saw reality, there is no person. And yet that experience could be the experience that a person is having. So what is more accurate is to say we can have an experience, or know ourselves. I don't mean like an experience, and by the use of experience it comes and it goes, because we can know ourselves. There can be a state of the human being where there is connection to this formless awareness on an ongoing basis. So it's not necessarily an experience that comes and goes. But even if we have the sustained, stabilized state in daily living, which I would say is an experience, all of daily living is an experience regardless of what form it takes. So if we have daily living and the sense of being formless awareness, we could conclude, based on that experience being there consistently, that there is no person. And what I say is, no, not at all. That is a state of the person. So the person can very much feel blown up, as in the person can have a state when they're driving their car, when they're walking through the street, when they're doing the shopping, of being expanded formless awareness. And if we conclude somehow that what I am is formless awareness, and I am based on that experience, and the body is just this thing that happens to always be there in the experience, we may be getting it completely wrong. It may be that there is a person, and that is just one of the states that are available to humans. I mean, when you think about it, doesn't that make sense? So maybe this spiritual journey is simply about an evolution, a change of the human being, a change of the person. And that the teachings that say there is no person, etc., are very creative and profound and amazing methodologies and introductions into life to bring about the change of that person. by describing life and framing life radically differently in order for those changes to happen. Now, there are plenty of teachings out there that, when you look at them, are not particularly accurate, in a sense. That doesn't make them bad at all. If they were accurate, they wouldn't be effective. So someone sent me, let's see if I can find it here. Someone sent me a quote from No, I don't have it here. But the quote essentially said, when you have no preferences, then you are no longer attached. And that was from the third Zen patriarch. So I assume he knows what he's talking about, right? And still, I'd say that's not very accurate. Enlightenment isn't about not having any preferences. You can't not have preferences, because the body is there, and the body has built into it biological senses of pleasure and pain, and so that by default means we will prefer pleasure than pain. Biologically, so what is clearly being pointed at in that paragraph about when we have no preference, then attachment has fallen away. What it's really meaning is that when we don't insist psychologically that our preference is delivered. So, but the easy way of saying that, in order for it to make a difference to someone at a certain part on the journey, is not to go in and say, when we don't psychologically insist on our preference being delivered, which is what really what attachment to outcomes is not to not have the preference, but to not insist on your preference being delivered. But because those two things are very intertwined, the psychological attachment, which is the insistence on the preference, and the biological preference, they're very nuanced difference because of the nature of the fact that attachment is attached to the preference being delivered. So they can't be seen separately for a while until there's more clarity. So the teaching just says, when you have no preferences, because it's there to inspire the body-mind organism to stop valuing one over the other. And the valuing one over the other is the basis on which the attachment happens. And so if it encourages us to have no preference, if that's what enlightenment is described, I have no preference, then we'll have the body-mind organism will have the reason to say that to not get involved in pleasure or pain, which isn't not having a preference. It's not getting involved in your preference being delivered or not. And so what was the point in me saying that? The point in me saying that is not at all trying to say the teaching is wrong. In fact, the opposite. I'm saying that a teaching will specifically say things that are not accurate, knowing that they're not accurate, because they know that they're more effectively said that way. So there are many things in many teachings that are not that accurate. So what you are is not the body. Your formless awareness is not really that accurate. It's very effective. If you sort of said to someone, you are the body, but you're also formless awareness, it's not radical enough for some seeker that is heavily identified with the body to have that structure broken, because it's a hybrid, it's a halfway. So if you tell them you are not the body, stop insisting that you are the body, don't be identified with the body, that is giving the body-mind organism new conditioning that gives it reason to not get involved in pain in the body, because the body itself will say, that's not what I am, don't worry about it. You're just reinforcing an idea of who you're not by getting involved in this and that. So there's reasons for teachings to say things that are not particularly accurate, and so I say this so that we can think about it and go, so that thing, that description in the teaching that told me X, Y, and Z, and maybe that's what's coming up, going, look, I'll bring the book and I'll show you where so-and-so says that, you are the absolute. And it describes it as the absolute is formless awareness that is aware of I am as an object, for example. I say, yeah, but that's not proof that that's what you are. That's a concept as part of a teaching in a book. And then the intellect might go, I've always taken what's in these books as truth. So yeah, I know, that's what our intellect tends to do with concepts. So in the awakening, what's known as an awakening experience, when it becomes clear, especially when awareness of the of thought, which we become aware of thought for the first time at a particular time, and it's like, oh my God, what I thought I was, the thinker, is just an object, a thought object. And then the body can be seen as just a body appearance that in another moment, that body appearance, or at least even if the body is still there, the sense that I am that falls away. And so as that is revealed, what is revealed is the nature of experience. And so it's like, none of it is real. The body is just an appearance being painted into the experience. Not just painted visually, but painted in terms of the full experience. It's being inserted into the experience, and it's taken to be truth. And so those awakening experiences can reveal the experiential nature of daily life. And so that's when someone says, there is no person. The person is just an appearance being painted into the momentary experience. What you are is the awareness that is aware of the person. That's why it's said. Because the seeker has had an experience present that shows them a different perspective of what experience is. And in that perspective, the sense of being the body shifts. And then, so it's like, oh my God, it's just an experience that I am this. In another experience, the body can completely fall away, meaning in the experience there's no visual of the body, and maybe the edges of the body and any sense of touch falls away. And what one knows oneself as is formless awareness and no body. And so then we might say, there was an experience of no person, because there really isn't a person. We would say if there was a person as a real thing, then it would never change. It would never vanish in certain experiences. in meditation, we see that the body, the sense of the body falls away. The sense of being personal falls away. And there is an impersonal sense. Now that to me is just it's showing us how experience can be deconstructed. You can remove certain components of experience. Not you can remove them, they can be removed. And then the experience is felt exactly according to what components are added in or taken away. So that does demonstrate the nature of experience. That experience is exactly that. It's an experience. It doesn't prove that there is nothing from where the experience is coming. It doesn't prove that what is in the experience, which is layers of experience or content, you could say, it doesn't prove that that is not a reflection of something that objectively exists outside of the experience. We're told in the Advaita teachings that all there is God, and that God is awareness. That's to create the awakening, to see the experience as experience. So we're told all there is God, and everything is God, and everything arises in God, is made of God, and witnessed by God, in order to help us with the awakening. Then the awakening happens, and then we say, oh, this is right, this is all arising in God, and all there is God, and everything is made of God, and there is nothing outside of God. And now that's where we've made a mistake. That's where we've taken the teaching to be truth. It's done its job, it's created the awakening, and then we're running with it as absolute truth. We don't know that there isn't actually a human being that experiences the external world and itself within its own consciousness. In fact, that's what I think this is demonstrating. Even if it's not demonstrating that, it appears like it's demonstrating that. So the experience of daily life is of a person in a world, and if we don't question it, it seems like it's all objectively real. The teachings come along to get us to see it as experience, which means we become aware of the experience of the world, which is all we have of life, is the experience arising in the moment. Then we conclude that there is no world except for the experience. So there's a difference between the experience and the thing itself. And what I think is great about life is, why not look at it as both? We only have an experience of the tree, an experience of the book, an experience of the body, but that experience is an experience of time and space, a world of time and space and form. So maybe it's an experience of what is really there. Even if it's not, even if it's all a sort of virtual reality, a play of consciousness, a dream, a virtual experiment of an advanced civilization, maybe even a rehabilitation program of an advanced civilization, a learning program maybe. Even if it's that, we still have to live it as it's presenting. At some point after all of the awakenings, we'll say, so what's the point? And I would say the point is to get on with living it as if it is real. Knowing that certain aspects of it are, or at least living it as if it is real, understanding what it is that we are living. Now, that doesn't go as far as to say, oh, we are living a dream, because we don't know that. It does go as far as I think we can confidently say that life, the experience of life, is an experience arising in consciousness. But I would rather then say, oh, well, it seems like the best thing to do is to live it as if it is an experience of a time and space world and a human being in that time and space world. And as we come to understand it better, what falls away is the belief in personal doership and attachment to outcome. Why does that fall away? Because when we really get down to it, we say, actually, the only problem with life, at first we think the problem with life is that things go wrong and that there's pain in life and that people die and that we have to work and it gets cold in winter. And, that's what we experience life, the problem with life. As we look more closely, we realize the real problem is our uncomfortableness with life. And then we realize teachings that seem to be telling us to wake up to the reality is really just if the process takes us further and further, the teachings are really telling us the problem is your involvement and your attitude to life. So they'll help us by telling us, you're not a person, so don't be involved in life as if you're a person. And if that helps and we find ourselves no longer getting involved with life as a person, at some point we have to come back and go, well, actually, maybe I am a person. And if I acknowledge I'm a person, maybe I can be a person and still not get involved in life. And we find that's possible if certain things have been uprooted. And then we think, oh, okay, so I don't need to keep hanging out as no person. I can just come back and say I am a person. I experience myself as a person. And yet this person doesn't find themselves getting involved in outcomes in the same way as they used to. So when it comes back to it, it's all about peace of mind in daily living. And peace of mind means the end of suffering. The end of suffering is a recognition that the suffering is a certain type of thinking based on one's attitude to life, based on one's attitude to the other, based on one's attitude to oneself, which is a deeply ingrained set of beliefs, energetic, and you're not in control of how that strong set of energies makes you feel and function. You're not in control of that. So you are going to suffer if those energies are in place. But the process of life is undoing those, especially if we find ourselves on a certain path. Just having listened to all of this nonsense is changing things. You don't have to understand it beyond listening. If the listening makes you feel like, oh, I have to change this and that, I have to see that I'm formless awareness, that's the doership taking the concepts and turning it into a project and a mission. And if that happens, well, that's happening. At some point, we'll realize that's more suffering, and maybe the system will say, I couldn't care less about all this seeking. I couldn't care less about trying to make this awakening happen, because I see that if I care less about that, or if I am heavily attached to that, thinking I need to make it happen, that just makes me feel frustrated. That creates more suffering. And so then we see that's actually suffering. Then it might click, oh, I'm not the doer, I'm a biological instrument functioning. So, well, I'll leave it up to God. I wasn't going to take questions today, but I forgot to say that at the beginning of the talk. So I'll answer 2 questions and I'll keep them brief if I can. Hey, Jim.
I 3 days ago, I got to experience the body dissolving and the awareness becoming merged with that body, and it was sort of like I just a couple days later I thought, oh, it's kind of like being beamed up in the Star Trek. It's like the body just disappears, and then for a bit there was kind of like this soup of light, or light soup. Just it's just a feeling. It was like, I guess, and I was, for a second I thought, oh, I wonder if I can move this around and change things in that field of just energy. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's one question. Is that possible to, whenever just in the an energy of awareness, to move things? Because I didn't know what I would move. I could move something that my eye would turn out on my toe, or maybe I'd live in Somalia instead of here. So that's possible.
Did you try moving anything?
I actually swirled around in it. It was just because it was kind of like this feeling of joy, like, oh, it's movable. I was like, so I just kind of, I don't know what, I wasn't moving anything, but it just felt like I was swishing around it. I swished it. Nothing changed.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, if you can have an experience where things move around. I wouldn't say that is something to strive for, or at all what would be normal. I can tell you I can't move anything around. But it wouldn't surprise me that we can have experiences where that happens. So, especially if you take some sort of mind-altering substance, we know that the experience can be created in fairly creative ways. And peak experiences are, in a way, a bit like that, but without the substance. The problem is when people have those experiences and something like that happens, which, remembering, is not necessarily what's really happening because you are doing it or whatever. It's just how the experience is presenting, showing you it's an experience. So in an experience, I wouldn't be particularly surprised if a apple goes floating past me. Because I go, oh, okay, well, that's a bit odd. Except I understand that in an experience, an apple can go floating past me. So you have dreams at night, which are experiences, and all sorts of strange things can happen in the experience. The problem is when we have an experience like that, and then we say, oh, I know that we can manifest things, for example, or I can control my reality because, back in 1985, this happened, I had this experience, and that could, that's what happened. So when we make these big, far-reaching claims based on having an experience that was like that, it means we're not really treating it as an experience that was showing us something, but what it was showing us is not necessarily what reality is or how life will eventually be or like that. It was actually just showing us, on the one hand, life's an experience, and it can also show you that it could be showing you it's not as fixed as we might think. But our intellect might grab onto the experience and create some conclusions that are, maybe in hindsight we'll see, oh, that wasn't the best conclusion to draw. It was lacking some critical thinking. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, there was no drugs. I didn't do any drugs, and there was nothing there. There wasn't anything. It was just kind of like it felt like reality, just the way things were, without. This there's a body, but there is no body. It's just energy kind of thing. So it's just sort of like, it's just swishing around in energy somewhat. And thought, oh, I wonder if because I don't know what energy is the foot. I don't know what energy is anything else. It was just blank energy. So then the next day you did your talk on, you were talking about, there's no victim, there's no perpetrator type thing, something like that, where, because we're all one sort of thing. And then I thought, yeah, I understand that, because it's like it was all one experience. And this was the ghost day. And then the memory of my stomping lady upstairs came to me. She went on a rampage for 3 days, just boom, 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 stomp, stomp. She's not supposed. Then my thoughts started going. She's not supposed to have hardwood floors. She has hardwood floors. She does. She's disrespectful. I don't stomp on my floor. She destroyed my whole year here, moving here. I bought this condo to have this expectations. You taught me about expectations. I'm going to have family. I'm going to have community. I'm going to have security. All this stuff, and they all got destroyed buying this condo. I'm in depression for 2 years, and her stomping for a year. So that came in. That memory came in, and I just totally lost connection to that whole thing. Whenever you were talking, I couldn't pay attention to a lot of your talk during that, because I couldn't let it go. So this is, and you were talking about something of the flames inside, and that was very strong flames inside.
So the talks aren't about saying you should let it go. Actually, the talks are saying life is unfolding as destined. And so actually in that moment, it was destined for you not to be able to let it go. And so in many moments, it will be destined for suffering to be there, for the letting go not to happen. And our thinking mind comes in and says, okay, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I let go? Because it's not appreciating that, in this moment, letting go is not destined to happen. So if we include that as an option, which, when the thinking mind hears the end of suffering as an instruction for it to do, then it doesn't hold the painful or the less favorable as a possibility. It says, okay, I'm going to make that happen, and I want it to be the best. Whereas the teaching is actually saying that the flow of life is pleasure or pain, and it will unfold according to destiny, and your suffering or your peace of mind is also part of destiny, not in your control, and it will unfold as destined. So maybe next time it's possible, when the suffering is there, to go for the thought to arise, because your genes and up-to-date conditioning have been updated. The thought will arise, it could be that it's destiny for the suffering to be here, so let me relax. Let me relax and leave the suffering to be there, because I don't have a job to do.
Then that makes me wonder, when are you supposed to do something about it? Because life in America is 1,000 times better after gay marriage. Before, as I'd walk down the street, people holding signs, gays, God hates fags, you're going to hell. The Republicans would be saying gays are going to destroy the fabric, vote for us, get rid of them. And then people fought to change that. If I would sit there and say, okay, this person, I feel horrible, this person's accusing me of destroying the moral fabric of America, and I just kind of didn't do anything about it.
So I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm saying understand that everything is a happening. So if it's destined for you to, join a rally, you'll do that. If it's destiny for the suffering to stop, it will stop. If it's not destiny for you to join the rally, you won't. So this isn't telling you, you see, the thinking mind says, so now you're telling me to stop, to not stop suffering, because it might be destiny for the suffering to be there, right? In the way like, you're telling me not to go to the rally. And I'm really saying, no, witness everything as a happening and understand it's not your doing. So understanding you're not the doer isn't going to stop life from happening.
And then if it brings me joy to hit the ceiling with a broomstick when she stomps, I guess that's what I do. Just let it.
Yeah, and so watch that as a happening. Like, so why are you hitting the ceiling with a broomstick? Because of your genes and up-to-date conditioning and the circumstance you find yourself in. And so I say...
I haven't done it yet. I've been very civil. I text her. But I think it'd be maybe more appropriate. I don't know. I'll try.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating that you do it either, because next thing you know is that you might find something on your car windscreen, or there's going to be consequences. It might end up, escalating into family feud or neighbors feud. So I'm not saying don't do it either. I'm not saying do it. I'm saying if you do it, if you're there hitting the thing, watch yourself hitting the ceiling with the broom, and understand that's destiny unfolding. Because if
something's going to happen, then hole in the ceiling or whatever.
Yeah, you don't know where it's going next. Sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't get what you want, and sometimes you get much more than you expect.
All right. I'll let you move on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim. Hello, Arula. Arula. Hello, Rula.
Yes, can you hear me? Hi, Roger.
Yes, I can. Hello.
Thank you so much. I know you weren't going to take questions. I appreciate it. I will try to make it short because you said so much. And I am new to your, although I've listened to Ramesh, new to your teaching. So I'm trying to reconcile one thing. So awareness, the sense of being, I don't know whether it's I am or the dissolving of I am, whatever it is, the sense of being, of existence, to me is the same experience as knowing. The metaphor is light, but light of knowing. So, so if I sense my being, I'm also knowing that.
Yes.
So that's awareness, being aware of its being, right?
That I would say is aware of being, or aware of existence, aware of I am.
So let's say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt if there's more, but
no.
So your teaching is, and I do understand after the last time we talked, I realized the error of my question initially asking you last time, but and I actually had a little realization after your answer and watching it again. But the peace of mind in daily living, essentially in your teaching, comes down to not to do with there is preference or there isn't preference, but not identifying, not expecting, right? Not having expectation, letting the moment unfold as it is.
Yes.
Right?
The absence of the attitude of doership and attachment to outcomes.
Absence of the attitude
of doership and attachment to outcomes. Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to talk about real quick, well, it might not be quick, but about death, because a lot of what you were saying today in terms of being and knowing, awareness, consciousness, consciousness with objects, consciousness devoid of objects. So death to me is very much like deep sleep. Awareness is always present, ever present. And either there are appearances in consciousness or in awareness, or there are not appearances, depending. So I guess fundamentally the fear is of death. So the fundamental fear of death. And to me, the teachings, whatever they are pointing to, often is the sense that awareness devoid of objects doesn't mean death. Awareness remains. That sense of being, when I have that sense of being, there isn't the sense that this is going to go away. There's the sense that this is ever present. How do you, now I understand if we have the thought of death and the death, then you have an attachment to that. You're thinking about it, you're worried about it. So in your teaching, you could just simply let go of that, right?
Let go of which? Of the thought of
let
death?
Let go, of the thought of death. Yeah, don't worry about it, basically, and just let it unfold.
Actually,
but to me,
yeah, go on.
Yes, I was just going to say, to me, the realization of the fact that being is ever present leads to that fear of death simply dissolving, because there is a sense that I won't die. And I'm trying to say this very quickly. I could say it in a million different ways and be very detailed about it. But I don't know if you kind of get what I'm saying. And I wanted to see how your teaching reconciles that idea of death and the feeling that you see what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. This is pretty pertinent for me. So I guess a lot of what I talk about is my direct experience as a seeker going through various changes. And my seeking came from the top-down Nisargadatta Ramana and Course in Miracles and Tao Te Ching. So it started off with the realization of awareness and being and what seemed like proof that life was an illusion. And thankfully, when I met Ramesh, very clearly it was the next phase of integrating all of that realization. And so I can very much relate to what you're saying, because those are certain notions that I had, and they're notions that are inspired by shifts and by experience and realizations. So I'm not diminishing the importance of what you're saying, but at some point we need to keep getting pushed past certain platforms we're on, or certain phases and stages that we're at. So Ramesh said to me, so this notion about awareness and deep sleep, you said it as a given. I think you'll find it's much less of a given than you might think. But it's been inserted into us as a concept, and we believed that concept, and it's there for a reason, because it creates, if awareness in deep sleep is introduced as a concept, it creates a platform that is really quite far back for us to step onto. A platform in terms of understanding, getting a sense of what awareness is in order for an awakening to that awareness to happen. So by saying there is awareness in deep sleep, it's in a way isolating awareness in a way that our intellect can visualize, so that it can help separate the awareness that is here now, and become aware of it. So awareness in deep sleep is spoken about really because it will help us realize awareness in the waking state. And because it is an important point that is used in teachings, we tend to believe it because we're very easily convinced. Someone will give us certain what seem like proofs, like when you wake up in the morning, you slept so well, or whatever. And so, go on.
Oh, yes, that's actually an example that, is very much in my experience as far as teaching. Yes.
And it's not unfortunately, that's not at all a proof. If you apply critical thinking to it, it fails miserably as a proof. But the fact that it fails miserably as a proof doesn't mean it shouldn't be included in a teaching, because we believe it, and that's what's important, because it's a tool in the teaching. And so one of the ways of getting us to believe something is by saying something that seems like that we'll have some sense of, because we'll have a resonance to it. Oh yeah, I do wake up feeling like I've slept so well. And so then we say, oh, so that must mean, and we go around saying that must mean there was awareness in deep sleep because I know I slept well. And yet I wasn't there. So awareness might have been there, or must have been there. And there's...
Well, if I may just interrupt for one moment, if you want to call it reality, the idea that reality is always here, is always present, whether that reality is nothingness or somethingness, awareness or being or whatever you want to call it, whether the body and the world appearances are there or not, that something is ever present, something is always here. So deep sleep, it's not as if reality disappears, as if life disappears. I guess.
Well, I think it is.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
We have these ideas of what reality is, and then that idea then... so we say reality always is. So, but what is this reality that always is? Because a moment ago you were referring to reality as awareness, which really means we're saying that the ultimate is awareness, that the most basic or the most true, that which remains is awareness, which is the basis of your next part, which is there's nothing to be afraid of in death because I remain. Or, I remain.
Yes, exactly.
So unfortunately, I'd say, no, I don't agree with any of that. But the good point is that I will, in not agreeing with it, we can replace it with something that I think is even more valuable, as far as us being able to see various things beyond those concepts, because those concepts might actually be placating the identity, right? It might be a concept that is allowing the nervous system in a way to settle, because we have a reason not to be afraid, let's say. So I very much had this idea that we can be at peace because what I am was never born and will never die. And so after meeting Ramesh, I sort of had to question a lot of these concepts, these spiritual concepts. And they're not just concepts. When you have certain awakenings, there are certain flavors in the experiences, right, or in the shifts. There are certain flavors. like what you mentioned, that the I am is timeless and changeless and ever present. There's that flavor to it, and we often take the flavor as being a reflection of truth. Like, oh, that's what it has, that flavor, or it has that feeling, so that's truth. And we really have to register that experience is a very relative thing, and our interpretation of experience is often not appreciating it as a relative thing, so we draw conclusions based on experience. And as we start to realize this, we might temper some of the beliefs, essentially, that have set in place, beliefs that have been supported by, firstly, the concepts that the teachings put forward, that are there to move us along and to create shifts and awakenings, and beliefs that have been put in place by the concepts and the flavor that comes with the various experiences and the various insights. So at some point, I had to say, do I really know that what I am will remain in after death? Do I know that what I am, the formless I am, the I am that is sort of not on the level of physical, but on the timeless, formless level that we can experience in daily living and in the manifestation, do I really know that that existed before I was born and will exist after I die? Because you go to this thing about deep sleep, and you'll probably confess to the fact that, I've run with the notion that this I am is in deep sleep, but do you have the experience of it as a permanent sense in deep sleep that I am? And we'll probably go, well, I guess not. But I mean, I've had the sense of being aware while sleeping, but that to me is not deep sleep. That would be a layer of sleep that is still what I would say is in the manifestation. So awareness can still be in that level of sleep. But to me, deep sleep, it makes more sense that the sense of I am, definitely the sense of I am, but maybe even awareness, they too fall away in deep sleep. So when I question, do I know that what I am, or am I just believing it? Is it just a convenient belief? But the problem I had was, it was like, oh my goodness, my whole piece is based on that, because it's very placating, it's very reassuring, and it's a place where we can drop into. And when we drop into that place, we know it as that place outside of time and space where what I am is not changing and da-da-da-da-da. When we know us, when we drop into that, and inevitably it's accompanied by those descriptions of what we are, that's part of the dissolving of the suffering process. A lot of the attachments fall away because we are pulling out of involvement in the attachments and resting in this being place. And so we might find that peace of mind sets in, and then we question, the thought comes up, do I really know that I exist before I'm born and will never die? And so I came to the conclusion at that point and said, actually, I don't. That's a belief. And I thought, oh, this could be a problem, because what if I question that belief and I have to say, I don't know, and then my suffering comes back because I'm now not sure that, what I am exists after death. The good news was I said, well, I'm not interested in running with a belief, because it had become very apparent that any beliefs are really an obstacle somewhere in the mix. So I dropped that belief, and I went to the I am itself, the being itself. And when you're at the being itself, when you're resting on the being itself, you'll find it doesn't tell you that it existed before, and it doesn't tell you that it will exist after. It just says, I am now. I mean, it doesn't say it. The feeling, the direct knowing is I am. It's not I was or I will be, it's I am. And so if I dropped that belief, or when I dropped that belief, I found that the suffering didn't come back. The suffering remained absent, as it did when I was when I was holding the notion that what I am was never born and never die. So then that was good news. That was great news. So I said, actually, the fact that I was never born and never died is not the source of my peace of mind. Then I got to replace it with something much better, which was, oh, my peace of mind is because I am now. And that's when it dawned on me, is that the core of the human being is not interested in whether it was or whether it will be. It's just perfectly content with the fact I am now. I am now. And if we're getting comfort out of the idea, oh, but I need to know that I will be after death, then that's, to me, very clearly placating a fear of the doer, or the attachment more so, the attachment that feels like it needs to be forever. Because so that's just a psychological fear. Because if you look at death in relation to deep sleep is wonderful. We can't wait to go to deep sleep, but not because it feels wonderful, but because it's the end of the manifestation, it's the end of the person, it's the end of the I am. So the end of I am is not a tragedy at all. We experience it regularly. The end of I am is the ultimate peace of mind. The peace of mind, the sort of Mahasamadhi, the super samadhi, which is what death is referred to. Mahasamadhi is the king of peace of mind, where we don't even have to deal with existence. So my view is that the fact that I'm running with the notion, not as some absolute truth, but I'd rather look at it, it makes sense from here, is that what happens after death is really irrelevant. That will get dealt with at that point in time. If there is anything after death, if there is anyone to experience anything, then they'll experience it. What I'm looking for is happiness for Roger in this life now. And frankly, just so saying, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to relate to there's nothing after death, just like deep sleep. So deep sleep is great. There's no one there to have an issue with anything. There's no one there to even have an issue with not existing. And after death, I'd say there's no one there to be concerned with the fact that they're dead. And when I was preceding all of this, when I said to Ramesh, well, there's awareness in deep sleep, which was my belief at the time, he said, Roger, if there is nothing to be aware of, which is something you said, but there is awareness, was what you said, which is what I said to him. And his answer was, Roger, if there's nothing to be aware of, where is the question of awareness? And I thought, it actually hit me very profoundly. If there's nothing to be aware of, where is the question of awareness? Now, there was a little thing that sort of argued with that, which is, no, awareness is just aware of itself. There doesn't need to be something. And then it occurred to me, oh, that is, when awareness is aware of itself, that is something, not nothing. When there is awareness of nothing, the nothing has become something. And so complete absence or complete nothing necessitates the absence of awareness. So complete nothing is the absence of awareness. Where all this gets what was needed for me, one of the important parts, was to stop relating to reality as awareness. Because if we keep insisting that reality is awareness, which is just a concept we've been given, then we'll have a hard time imagining the absence of awareness, because we've associated it with and interchangeable with the word reality or absolute or truth. As soon as if we question and say, actually, how do I know that truth or absolute is awareness? What if awareness is an aspect of source that only presents in the manifestation? In that case, the awareness is not necessarily something that has to persist. Awareness is something that will persist in the manifestation. So there has to be awareness in order for there to be experience. So whenever there's experience, we know there's manifestation. But if we go this extra step and say, oh, truth, awareness is truth, then all these other concepts will have to remain in place, and we won't have the there won't be the basis on which they can also collapse.
Roger, thank you. That is an unexpected and beautiful answer, and there's a lot there for me to explore. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.